Hello there. For centuries, the United Kingdom has been seen as a pillar of stability, democracy and order. Yet beneath the surface, deep fractures have been growing. Economic turmoil, cultural divides, and a growing sense of betrayal by the political elite have left many wondering if Britain is heading towards an inevitable collapse. With mass migration or immigration reshaping communities, energy prices soaring, and a government seemingly more interested in serving global institutions than its own people, frustration is at an all-time high. And some ask, what would happen if the UK finally snapped? Could a civil war break out? And if it did, what would it unfold? Now, how could a civil war start? Well, at first glance, a civil war in Britain sounds absolutely absurd. Totally stupid. Absolutely ridiculous and full of BS. But historically, no nation is immune to collapse, especially when its own people feel abandoned. The UK faces several serious problems, and if they continue to worsen without resolution, unrest could spiral into outright conflict. Now, millions of people are struggling to afford even the most basic necessities. The cost of housing, food and transport has skyrocketed, while wages have stagnated. Now, many blame the government's economic policies, which seem to be more focused on international interest than supporting its own citizens. Energy prices have become unbearable, and this is partly due to these green policies prioritising net zero targets over energy security. Instead of using UK's own resources, the government has made Britain dependent on expensive foreign imports. Ordinary families now struggle to heat their homes, while multinational corporations continue to make record profits. The immigration problem. Now, immigration has always played a role in shaping Britain. But in recent years, the sheer scale of arrivals has transformed entire communities almost overnight. Illegal crossings across the Channel continue at record numbers, and with many arguing that the government has lost control of its borders. Or even worse, it's deliberately allowing mass migration for political reasons. Now, this has led to tensions in towns and cities where public services are already stretched to the limit. Crime rates have risen in some areas, and there's a growing resentment amongst native Britons who feel displaced in their own communities. And perhaps the biggest source of anger is this government's blatant disregard for the will of the people. Whether it's lockdown policies during COVID, financial mismanagement, or refusal to act on illegal immigration, there is a growing belief that those in power do not serve the interests of the UK. Many believe that the British government is no longer working for its own citizens, but instead of global institutions like the World Economic Forum, the European Union, even despite Brexit, which isn't Brexit, it's binary, Brexit in name only, and multinational banks. Policies increasingly seem to favour the agendas of international elites rather than ordinary working people. Now, if these frustrations continue to build without resolution, civil unrest could escalate into something far more serious. Now, if war were to break out, the UK wouldn't simply divide into two sides. Instead, different regions and groups would pursue their own interests, turning Britain into a fragmented battlefield. The government, backed by its military and police, would fight to maintain control. However, given their unpopularity, it's certain how much loyalty they would actually command. And if, for example, soldiers refused to follow orders, especially against their own people, the government would quickly lose control. Scotland, for example, has long sought independence, and a civil war would provide the perfect opportunity to break free, with Holyrood declaring itself as a separate state. The UK government would be either forced to recognise Scottish independence or launch military operations to reclaim it. Tensions in Northern Ireland have never been fully disappeared. A UK civil war could see Republican forces attempt to reunify the island of Ireland, leading to fierce battles with Unionist paramilitaries. The Republic of Ireland might intervene, leading to an international dimension of war. And parts of England itself could rise against the government, where in the North and Midlands, long ignored by Westminster, could form separatist groups demanding new government. Some factions might push for a new English Republic, for example, while others might want to return to traditional monarchy rule. London can also become a separate battleground. As the political and financial heart of Britain, it could either serve as a government's last stronghold or become a revolutionary capital. Now, how could this civil war unfold? Well, in my opinion, the first signs of collapse would be mass protests turning into riots. If the government responded with force, deploying military units or imposing martial law, it could backfire, driving even more people to take up arms. Now, nationwide uprising, protests over the cost of living, immigration, the government's overreach turned violent. Some police and military units refuse to crack down on citizens. The government loses control over key cities like Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow. Scotland formally declares independence. The UK military is sent in to reassert control, but fighting erupts. Northern Ireland sees a surge in Republican activity, leading to violent clashes between royalists and nationalists. The Irish government debates military intervention. Rebel control zones emerge in Northern Ireland, in the Northern and Midland cities, declaring themselves independent from London. The government deploys remaining forces to retake lost territory. Armed militia begin forming, taking controls of local areas. And it goes on. It goes on. Now, the outcomes of something like this is the government wins. But what cost? The government reasserts the control, but Britain is no longer a democracy. Martial law remains and the country effectively becomes a police state. The breakup of the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland and even parts of England separate, permanently dissolving the United Kingdom. Then we've got total anarchy and collapse. The UK breaks apart into warring factions resembling the Balkans in the 1990s. An international peace deal, the EU and the UN could impose a ceasefire, forcing a political settlement, but tensions remain high. But all this, could it really happen? Well, while civil war in Britain may still seem unlikely, many of the underlying causes, economic collapse, government overreach, mass migration, regional separatism, are real and worsening. History has shown that no country is invincible. If those in power continue to ignore the suffering of the people, refuse to secure borders, and prioritise the interests of global elites over British public, then this is going to carry on, and the unrest will only grow. And my only question is, will the UK fix its problems before it's too late? Or will it become another fallen empire, torn apart by its own divisions? So what do you think? Is the UK heading for collapse? Or can it still be saved? What would you think the biggest cause of a conflict would be? Please let me know your thoughts. Put them in the comments. In the meantime, take care. Bye now.